Issues involving the timing of this year's elections in Arizona, along with concerns over the Arizona Commerce Authority using public funds to entertain visiting executives, and an update on a lawsuit to block secrecy in elder abuse cases. There's plenty to discuss with Arizona Attorney General Kris Mayes, who joins us now in studio. Thank you, General Mayes. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ted.
Let's talk about these primaries and what's going on here, and the Republicans wanting to move these things up, wanting to shorten the days for curing. Your thoughts on 30,000-foot view?
Well, you know, the 30,000-foot view is we need to get this solved. We are right up on top of a deadline where we really need to come together, Republicans and Democrats, the legislature, the governor, Secretary of State, and myself. We all need to get on the same page about this. And this is really about setting a schedule for the upcoming election. And the story actually, Ted, goes a couple years back. Now, remember, a couple years ago, the Republican legislature and the Republican governor decided to tighten the percentage for recounts. Well, I guess that's sort of make it actually more expansive. So, we have recounts now at 0.5%. And my race in 2022 is a pretty good poster child for that. We had a recount. I won by at first a little over 500 votes. Then a recount was triggered, and so this is what that is really about. We have now the possibility in Arizona of having multiple recounts pretty much every election cycle because of that. You throw into that equation the fact that we now have an electoral count deadline because it's a presidential year of December 11th, and we've got a problem with the calendar, and so we need everybody to get together. There is a solution to be found here. Unfortunately, I think the Republicans are playing some games because they're trying to shorten the cure period.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Where you can cure ballots a period after Election Day. And, I think for folks like me and for the governor, that's not okay because it essentially means we're going to lose legitimate ballots, early ballots, when you shorten that cure period. So we want to see a compromise.
You've mentioned that you're concerned regarding the impact to low-income, tribal, and rural voters. What would that impact be?
Well, you think about it. You think about the Navajo Nation, which, by the way, is opposing that shortening of the cure period. Navajo Nation is a very sprawling part of Arizona. It's very rural in nature. A lot of polling places in various areas of the Navajo Nation. It's huge. You got voters who, sometimes when you're trying to cure ballots, it's hard to find voters because not everybody up there has an actual physical address. And so worried about them being able to cure their ballots if the Republicans are deliberately trying to shrink that cure period. But I think, taking it again back up, Ted, there's a compromise to be found here. What we need to do is come together as a state. This is a fix that we can make together. But there's got to be a willingness to do that.
Moving up the primary dates makes sense to you?
I actually think that's something we could do.
Right.
We got to make the decision, though. If we're going to move that primary date, county recorders, county elections officials need to negotiate polling places and things like that. But I think that's something that we could do because you've got the primary issue and then you've got this general election issue in the Electoral College deadline.
And the primary issue involves getting ballots to people to vote in the general. So the whole thing kind of tumbles. Is this the price to pay, though? Access, all sorts of signature verification things that are thrown now into this legislation. Is this the price you pay for bad legislation to fix what we won't call it bad legislation, but it's certainly legislation that needs to be fixed?
Well, I think a couple of things. Again, it goes back to, I think, what was a bad decision 2 years ago to make it to expand the number of recounts that we're going to have in the state of Arizona. That's a kind of chaos, a deliberate chaos that I think was thrown into the system. And I don't want to see a situation in which, this legislation that is making its way through the legislature essentially curtails and constrains that cure period. What we want to see is every legitimate vote counted, and all of those ballots counted. Everybody has a right to have their vote counted. I think we can come up with a solution, but both sides have got to get together. So
yeah, and quickly.
Yes.
Arizona Commerce Authority, give us an update on that, the idea of wining and dining bigwigs on the public dime. It sounds like what's on the private dime now?
Yeah, well, we made it clear to the Arizona Commerce Authority that we were going to file a lawsuit to stop them from spending taxpayer dollars on wining and dining CEOs, wealthy out-of-state CEOs at these events like the Waste Management Open and the NCAA tournament that we have coming up. And thankfully, they pulled back, and it turns out they've found a way to use private money from private sources to fund most of these events. But I will say we're going to be watching this very closely. I got an eagle eye on this situation.
Got the Final Four coming up, too.
we got the Final Four coming up, and their plan had been to spend $900,000 in taxpayer dollars. I think most Arizonans do not believe that it's appropriate to spend $900,000 to wine and dine a bunch of out-of-state CEOs.
Do you think there's an appetite growing, in part because of what you have done and what you have seen and reported? Is there an appetite just to get rid of the Commerce Authority? And do you think that would be a wise thing?
I don't necessarily think you have to do that. I mean, I remember the days when we had the Commerce Department, right? We had an actual Commerce Department. I thought its mission was a good mission, and then somehow it sort of morphed into the situation in which we were spending taxpayer dollars to go out and throw these lavish events. It violates the gift clause. We have a gift clause in the Arizona Constitution that was designed to prevent this very kind of thing.
Let's move on now to this update on a lawsuit, and this is the tough stuff. This is involving elder abuse, and I know this is important to you. And the idea of cases being decided out of court and away from public scrutiny, secrecy involved. Give us the latest on this.
So yeah, this is important to me. Combating elder abuse is a center point of my mission as Attorney General. We have put together a task force inside the AG's office. I have designated and appointed additional resources, investigators on this. We are going to be very aggressive in tackling elder abuse at nursing homes and by private individuals who are caring for loved ones and not doing it and doing it in a way that violates our laws. What you're talking about is a really insidious provision that a lot of nursing homes and long-term care facilities are using, called an arbitration clause, a secrecy clause, that forces you, and a lot of people, think about it, you're in the most vulnerable moment, and you are in the process of finding a place for your mom or your dad to live in their final years. And somebody hands you a contract and says, sign this, but you have to agree to keep any disputes between us secret and not tell the Attorney General or any other law enforcement about this. That is contrary to good public policy. That is contrary to the public interest, and it prevents me from doing my job, Ted. So we've filed against one of those. We are trying to make a point of this, and we're going to keep driving that case until we win.
Contrary to public policy, contrary to public interest, but is it contrary to the law?
I think it is. I mean, I think we believe it's contrary to the Adult Protective Services laws in Arizona. We think it violates, again, the laws that I am responsible for enforcing, and so we're making that case right now in front of a judge. We think we're going to get there, and we want to continue forward on this until we get this acknowledged by a court such that other facilities don't engage in these practices.
Is this something that the legislature and the governor could address?
Yeah, I think it is something that they could address. Whether that will happen this session, I don't know, given the way things are going.
Yeah, but why wouldn't they? I mean, is there a reason? Is it secret? Is it privacy? I know that privacy is a major issue for a lot of folks. Is that at play here?
I don't think I don't think that's a legitimate argument, because basically this is when you get to a point where someone has died or someone has been hurt, and an individual is trying to sue the nursing home, and they're basically saying, hey, you signed this contract and this has to be secret. Whatever deal I do with you, whatever payout you get has to be secret, and you can't tell the Attorney General about that. That's not okay. And that means I can't do my job, because the other thing that I want to do, Ted, is go after these facilities. Because that individual is in a facility that may be engaging in that kind of behavior on a wide scale.
Right.
And so I need to be able to potentially take over that facility, put it in receivership potentially. I can file a multi-million-dollar civil suit against that facility and make it clear to the entire industry, hey, this kind of abuse that has been chronicled in our newspapers recently has to come to an end.
Before we let you go, Senate Judiciary Chair wants you investigated. He wants you investigated because of a, quote, flood of questionable activity, a witch hunt over the way local elected officials are doing their jobs. Everything from refusing to defend certain things like the transgender athlete ban and other things, and basically going after what he says are elected officials who are just doing their jobs. He wants to know, they're going after you. What are your thoughts?
I think it's kind of laughable. And, that gentleman that you spoke of was not able to articulate a real basis for opening an investigation. I was kind of surprised that the Senate president allowed that to go forward. But I'm going to continue, Ted, to do my job. I think the people of Arizona are with me in the way I'm doing my job. We're about prosecuting elder abuse, protecting Arizonans against this fentanyl crisis that we have, going after the drug cartels and trying to shut them down, protecting our water supplies in this state, which we desperately need to do. It's kind of a circus and a sideshow, but it's sad too, because they're wasting taxpayer resources on this.
And yet the chairman here, the Judiciary Chairman here in the Senate, he could possibly be under investigation by your office.
Yeah, and as you know, and I've been on your show before and said this before, I'm not going to talk about that investigation except to say that there is one, and we're taking that very seriously. We'll update you when it's appropriate to do so.
Is there a timeline?
I'm not going to really present a timeline right now, except to say that we are working very deliberately, and we will finish up when we're ready.
Is the fact that this is an election year shaping that timeline?
I think it would be. I think it's fair to say that that's a factor. I mean, it has to be, and we are cognizant of the election clock, and I think every prosecutor in the land is cognizant of that. The Department of Justice has general guidelines for how it handles that, so that I think it's fair to say, yes, that's on my mind.
And last point on the investigation from the Chair of Judiciary here, the Senate President, as you said, you were surprised that he went ahead with this.
Yeah.
He said holding government responsible and accountable, that's part of the deal.
Yeah, well, this is really just about them, I think trying to grandstand. I think it's about their political base, and that's what I think is so sad. I think in previous decades, back when I was a Republican, this never would have been contemplated, because really what they're doing is launching an investigation against an attorney general they disagree with, and that's not a valid purpose.
Attorney General Chris Mays. General Mays, always good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ted. You too.